Coming live from the studio, this is All Sports with Gerardo. Thank you for watching another episode of All Sports. This is your host Gerardo, and all I talk is sports. On the show today, I am going to talk about the coronavirus, NFL football, and NBA basketball. Before I start the show, I hope you all had a great week. Before I start off, last week, I was wearing the official All Sports with Gerardo red shirt. This week, I am wearing the official black All Sports with Gerardo shirt. As you may remember, for about the last year, up until the time I had to be in this studio, instead of being in the Tivoli Met Radio studio on the Rary campus, I was wearing the official All Sports with Gerardo hat, which comes in red and black. In every other show, I would be wearing one of these hats, regardless if it was the red hat or the black hat, but I did have on the official All Sports with Gerardo hat. Just recently did I get the official All Sports with Gerardo t-shirt. So now, All Sports with Gerardo has the official All Sports with Gerardo hat and shirt, which comes in red and black, since red and black are the main colors for All Sports with Gerardo. If you are a fan of All Sports with Gerardo, make sure to purchase the All Sports with Gerardo hat or shirt, which comes in red or black. Starting in the next episode and going forward, I will now be wearing the official All Sports with Gerardo gear every episode. One episode it'll be the red gear, and the next episode will be the black gear, and I'll just alternate every week, and depending on what week it is, that will depend on what color I wear for that week. But every week I will alternate from red to black. As of right now, and going forward, I will be wearing the shirt. Hopefully sometime in the next few weeks, I can start wearing the hat. But for now, I'm going to wear the shirt until I get back into the Tivoli Met Radio studio. I cannot wear the hat in this studio because of the lighting. So if you haven't, make sure to purchase the All Sports with Gerardo gear, which is the hat and the shirt that comes in red or black, especially if you're a fan of All Sports with Gerardo. But now, All Sports with Gerardo has the official gear, which is the hat and the shirt. Moving on now to start off the show. To start off with the coronavirus, the return of sports. We have started to see the return of sports here in the US and in other countries around the world. Also, with the return of sports, we have also seen no fans in the stands. Here are a few questions that have been answered so far, and some of these questions still need to be answered. And there is one question, it's going to be a while until it gets answered. But as of right now, here is the status for each of these questions. The return of sports, we have started to see this around the world, and we're starting to see it now in the US. The return of sporting events, this was the first thing that started happening around the world, but especially here in the US. But we have seen sporting events return. The return of leagues, we started seeing this in other parts of the world, but we haven't really seen it here in the US. But as of now, that we are in June, we are going to start seeing the return of leagues here in the US, especially once we get into July, August, and September, and in the next few months for the rest of the year. So we will start seeing the return of leagues starting to happen here in the US in the next few weeks, but we have seen this happen in other parts of the world. The return of fans in the stands? There may not be an answer for this question as to when fans will be allowed back into stadiums or arenas or for sporting events. This answer may not come for the next few weeks, but it's definitely going to be interesting to see when this question is answered, but also who will be the first league or sporting event to allow fans back. We're going to have to wait and see who that is, but whoever it is, they're definitely going to make history. Also, when fans are allowed back, is it going to be at full capacity? Or is it going to be at a lower capacity like 25, 50, or 75%? We're going to have to wait and see. But it's likely going to be either at a 50% capacity or a full capacity. But we'll have to wait and see when this question is answered. The return of sporting events and leagues around the world. We have started to see this in other parts of the world. And we will continue to see this for the next few weeks as more leagues and sporting events start returning back or start their season. The return of sporting events and leagues here in the U.S. So far we have seen sporting events return back, but we haven't seen any leagues return back yet. But now that we're getting into the summertime, we are going to start seeing leagues return back, especially the major sports leagues here in the U.S. A few of them already have plans for returning back later on this summer, and in the next few months we'll see other leagues start their season as well. So it's great to see that sports is returning back, especially here in the U.S., since we've seen sports return back in other countries around the world. We have seen sports return in some parts of the world, which includes baseball in Korea, soccer in Europe, NASCAR, UFC, and PGA golf in the US. Now that we are in June, in July, the NBA and NHL will resume their season. In August, September, and in the next few months, the NFL, college football, and other leagues should be able to start their season. Major League Soccer announced they will return on July 8 with the MLS is Back tournament. So it's great to see that Major League Soccer will be returning back, especially that it'll be another league returning back here in the US, and they will get to start their season. Now looking at other leagues, which is some of the major leagues here in the US. As of right now, for Major League Baseball, their status is that they do want to play a 2020 season, and the commissioner, Rob Manfred, did say there will be a 2020 season. Now, who knows if it will really happen, or what will the season even look like? But we'll have to wait and see if Rob Manfred lives up to his words, and if there will be a 2020 season. There is a 50-50 chance that there will or will not be a 2020 season. But as of right now, in the last few days and even in the last few weeks, there has been many different proposals thrown for a 2020 season, for the amount of games, but especially how much individual players and other staff would be making. So we'll have to wait and see if there is a 2020 season. But as of right now, there's been different proposals thrown on the table, and none of them have been approved or agreed on. And what it's going to come down to is the money and how much individuals will make, especially the players. And if no one can agree to how much individuals will make, and if no one can agree to individuals taking a pay cut, Because if you've been following the news about Major League Baseball, no one really wants to take a pay cut. And that's why with every proposal that has been thrown on the table, the amount of games has changed, either by increasing more games or decreasing. So it's really going to come down to the amount of games that is played, but also how much will individuals like players make. And if the two sides can't agree to that, there will not be a 2020 Major League Baseball season. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with Major League Baseball in the next few weeks. But as of right now that we are in June, the time's ticking. And if something's not done and set in stone, so there will be a 2020 season put in place, so it can start sometime in the next few weeks now that we're heading into the summertime, there will just not be enough time to have a 2020 season in Major League Baseball. Because as each day passes, and now that we are in June, time is ticking. And time just keeps passing and passing. Now it's months passing instead of days and weeks. So if Major League Baseball can't agree to a 2020 season, and they just keep waiting and postponing agreeing to a proposal, there will not be enough time to play a 2020 season as we get later in the summer and once we get into the fall. And Major League Baseball already said they're not going to play into late fall or the winter. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens with Major League Baseball. It's definitely a league that you want to follow, because who knows what's going to happen with Major League Baseball and if they can pull off a 2020 season. But there is a great chance we're going to have to wait until 2021 to see a Major League Baseball season. For the NFL, even though the NFL is in its off season, this coronavirus pandemic has still been affecting the NFL. And since the off season has begun, with free agency, the draft, and now the off season programs, everything in the NFL has been virtually via Zoom or Skype. Now we're going to have to wait and see when teams are allowed back to their team facility. But as of right now, depending on what state it is, there are some team facilities that are reopening and allowing their coaching staff to return back to the facility. It just depends on what team it is and what state they are in. And every state has a different situation with the coronavirus pandemic. But as of right now, we have seen a few teams have their coaches return back to the team facility. We're going to have to wait and see what some of the other teams' decisions are. But the NFL is hoping that all the teams can return back to their team facility with all the players, coaches, and personnel by the end of July, when it's time for training camp to begin. And as of right now, the NFL is planning on having a 2020 season that will start on time and be formatted and play out just like any other NFL season in the past. And the NFL has plans for training camp to begin on time and for the 2020 season to begin on time and play out just like any other season. But of course, nothing's set in stone and everything can change. No matter if it's the NFL, any other league, or sporting event, anything can change in the next few weeks and in the next few months in regards to this coronavirus pandemic. We're just going to have to wait and see what happens, but the NFL wants all 32 teams to be able to return back to their team facility with the players, coaches, and personnel when it's time for training camp to begin. But as of right now, with the off-season programs, they will continue to be virtually via Zoom or Skype for the next few weeks until it's time for training camp. And we're just going to have to wait and see what happens with the NFL going into the next few weeks. Now, for whatever league or sporting event that gets to play in 2020 and even in 2021, for that league and sporting event, no matter what country it is, it's definitely going to be different for that league and sporting event with the type of season they are going to have and how the season is going to play out. So when leagues and sporting events around the world either resume or start their season in 2020 or even in 2021, there is a great chance the way their season plays out is going to be completely different from other seasons from the past, especially with this coronavirus pandemic. And we're just going to have to wait and see what happens with leagues and sporting events going into the next few weeks, the next few months, for the rest of the 2020 and even going into 2021. But there's no doubt that for each league and sporting event around the world, the type of season that they will have in 2020 or even in 2021 is likely going to be completely different compared to seasons in the last few years or from the past because of this coronavirus pandemic. And for the last few months and even going into the next few months, this coronavirus pandemic is very unpredictable. And as you've seen in the last few weeks, and even going into the next few weeks, with this coronavirus, anything can happen. And really, it's just going to have to play out. But also, you're going to have to expect the unexpected to happen with this coronavirus pandemic, no matter what country it is around the world. But there is no doubt, depending on what country it is, every country around the world has a different situation in regards to the coronavirus pandemic. Moving on now to NFL football. On Saturday, June 6th, former NFL wide receiver Richie Caldwell passed away. He was 41 years old. The Bengals announced cornerback Ken Riley passed away. He was 72 years old. Moving on now to NBA basketball. The return of the NBA, believe it or not, it's actually going to happen later on this summer. The NBA's Board of Governors has voted to approve the league's 22-team format to restart the 2019-2020 season in Orlando. The NBA will resume their season on July 31st at Disney World in Orlando with 22 teams and with no fans in attendance. The NBA decided to continue the regular season, and there will be 8 regular season games before the playoffs begin. All the teams contending for a playoff spot in the Eastern and Western Conference will play when the season resumes. Also, whatever teams were not contending for a playoff spot, their season is officially over, and they will have to wait to play basketball when the 2020-2021 season begins later on this year, which that season is expected to begin in December. So here are the teams going to Orlando. In the Eastern Conference, it's the Bucks, Raptors, Celtics, Heat, Pacers, 76ers, Nets, Magic, and Wizards. In the Western Conference, it's the Lakers, Clippers, Nuggets, Jazz, Thunder, Rockets, Mavericks, Grizzlies, Trailblazers, Pelicans, Kings, Spurs, and Suns. So as of right now, all the teams contending for a playoff spot in the Eastern and Western Conference will be going to Orlando to finish the 2019-2020 season. And later on this year, there is a great chance we will finally get to see who is the NBA champion for the 2019-2020 season. Also, at the end of this year, we will get to see the next season begin, which will be the 2020-2021 season. So as of right now, with the teams that are going to Orlando, the NBA is going off of the teams that were ranked in the playoff bracket for the Eastern and Western Conference. And all these teams are contending for a playoff spot in their conference. So you may ask, why is 22 teams going instead of 16, since there's only 8 spots in the Eastern and Western Conference, which would be 16 teams going to the playoffs? Well, the other teams that are outside of the top 8 are still going to Orlando because they are contending for a playoff spot. And as of right now, the NBA is going off of the current playoff picture for the Eastern and Western Conference when the season was suspended back in March. So all these teams will be going down to Orlando. So for the final 8 regular season games, as of right now, the current seeding for the Eastern and Western Conference is not set in stone. The teams that currently have a playoff spot in the top 8, and even the teams contending to make it into the playoffs and get that 8th spot in the Eastern and Western Conference, all these teams are going to get 8 final regular season games to play out the rest of the season, so they can either make the playoffs or, unfortunately, get eliminated and their season will be over at the end of the regular season. So the teams that are holding on to their current seed right now in both conferences, there is a great chance they're going to hold on to the seed that they're holding right now. But also, some of these teams could move up and down. And there are a few teams, especially in the Western Conference, that have a chance at sliding into that 8th spot. And even the team that is holding on to the 8th spot right now can slide out and get eliminated from the playoffs. But especially in the Western Conference, this conference is going to be interesting because there are 5 teams contending for the 8th spot. And 5 other teams outside of the top 8 are going to have a chance at trying to get that 8th spot and making it into the playoffs. But the teams that cannot get that 8th spot, especially in the Western Conference, at the end of the regular season, their season will be over. So this is the way it's going to work out. There will be 8 regular season games, and it will be a chance for all these teams to either move up or down in their conference and also get a certain seed in their conference for the playoffs. Now, with the team that is holding on to the 8th spot, at the end of the season, the team in the 8th spot, if they're up by 4 or more games from the 9th seed, then that team makes it into the playoffs and they will be the 8th seed. But if some of the teams outside of the 8th seed that are trying to get into the 8th seed are less than 4 games from reaching the current 8 seed, then there's going to be a tournament for the teams fighting for the 8 seed. And if the team that's currently holding on to the 8 seed wins both games, then they're the 8 seed. But if the team that's currently holding on to the 8 seed loses one of those games, then there will be more games and the tournament will continue on until either the team holding on to the 8th seed or one of the other teams that are trying to get into the playoffs and be that 8th seed wins enough games to get the 8th seed and make it into the playoffs. So for the Eastern Conference, it's pretty set in stone who's going to get into the playoffs. But in the Western Conference, it's definitely going to be interesting to see if the Grizzlies hold on to the 8th seed and make it into the playoffs, or is a team like the Trailblazers, Pelicans, Kings, Spurs, or Suns going to be able to slide in to that 8th seed and make it into the playoffs? But the Grizzlies, Trailblazers, Pelicans, Kings, Spurs, and Suns will all be contending for that 8th spot, and they're all going to try to make it into the playoffs. But unfortunately, once the regular season ends for the playoffs, there will only be 16 teams that make it into the playoffs, and the rest of the teams that couldn't get a playoff spot in the top 8 of their conference will be eliminated and their season will come to an end. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens in the Eastern and Western Conference when the season resumes. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens, especially what seed will certain teams get in the Eastern and Western Conference. Are there going to be teams that move up or down in the playoff seeding in their conference? Who are going to be the 16 teams that make it into the playoffs and continue on with the NBA playoffs? We're going to have to wait and see, but it's definitely going to be interesting to watch the rest of the NBA season, which will start on July 31st. But it's going to be great to see that the NBA is returning later this summer, and they are going to resume and play out the 2019-2020 season. And by this October, we should see an NBA champion for the 2019-2020 season. Then there will be a short off season with all the off season programs that need to take place. And then at the end of this year, we should see the 2020-2021 season begin. But it's just great to see that the NBA is going to be able to return and play out the season that they were currently playing later on this summer. And I'm just glad to see the NBA is going to be able to play, since the NBA is one of my favorite leagues and basketball has always been one of my favorite sports. So as of right now, there is a NBA schedule. The NBA is hoping that they can go off this schedule. It's set in stone what they want to take place, at what date, and at what month. But with this coronavirus pandemic, nothing's a guarantee. But the NBA is hoping that they can go off this schedule and all the different events can take place on a certain day or month that they have these events all scheduled for. So as of right now, taking a look at the NBA schedule, from July 9th to the 11th, they want training camp to begin and start, and they want all the 22 teams that are going to be playing in Orlando to be in Orlando by these dates, so training camp can begin and so they can get ready for the 2019-2020 season to resume in Orlando. On July 31st, the NBA wants the 2019-2020 season to resume, and the season's supposed to take place from July 31st and end by at least October 12th. On August 25th, the NBA will host the draft lottery. On October 15th, the NBA will host the NBA draft. On October 18th, the NBA will have free agency. On November 10th, the NBA wants the 2020-2021 training camp to begin, so all the teams can get ready to play the 2020-2021 season. And by December 1st, the NBA wants the 2020-2021 season to begin. So taking a look at the NBA playoff schedule, if the NBA needs to have the play-in tournament, they want it to take place from August 16th through the 17th. The NBA wants the first round to begin on August 18th. The NBA wants the second round to begin on September 1st. The NBA wants the conference finals to begin on September 15th. The NBA wants the finals to begin on September 30th. And by October 12th, the NBA wants the season to come to an end so they can prepare and get ready for the 2020-2021 season to begin in December. So taking a look at this NBA season that will resume on July 31st and end by October 12th. The NBA had to shut down the current season they were playing back in March due to the coronavirus. And as of right now, the NBA will resume the season on July 31st and play it out until October. So there will be a NBA champion for the 2019-2020 season, and then they want the 2020-2021 season to begin in December. But with the coronavirus pandemic, anything can happen, and even with this schedule that the NBA has set up and they want to follow starting in July and going into the next few months for the rest of the year, it's not a guarantee that this schedule can happen and that everything can happen by the date they want it to happen. Because with the coronavirus and the way it's been playing out for the last few months, and who knows how it's going to play out for the next few months, anything can happen with this coronavirus pandemic. Also, with the teams that are going to go down to Orlando, which will be 22 teams, it's going to be a few months that these 22 teams are going to have to stay in Orlando to play out the 2019-2020 season. Now, depending on which two teams makes it to the finals and what team wins the finals, those will be the two teams that stay the longest in Orlando. And as each team gets eliminated by the end of the regular season, or when they get eliminated in the playoffs, it's all going to depend on how they play for the rest of the 2019-2020 season. And depending on how they play is when it's going to be determined when their season will come to an end. As of right now, there are some NBA teams and players from these 22 teams that will be going down to Orlando that are worried about the coronavirus pandemic. But also, they're worried about being isolated in Orlando for the next few months. Now, the NBA has decided that the 22 teams that are supposed to go to Orlando to play out the rest of the season don't have to go. And even the players, they don't have to go. The NBA is not forcing anyone from these 22 teams to go down to Orlando. And if they don't want to go, that's their decision, and they're not going to be punished because they don't go. But the teams that do go down to Orlando, or if it's all 22 teams that go down to Orlando, the NBA is going to take every caution to make sure that all 22 teams, which includes the players, coaches, and personnel, are safe from the coronavirus. And every day, all these players, coaches, and personnel will get tested to make sure they don't have the coronavirus. And the NBA is going to do everything they need to do to make sure all these teams that go down to Orlando stay safe and stay safe from the coronavirus. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens with the NBA going into the next few weeks. And we're going to have to wait and see if all 22 teams land up going down to Orlando to play out the rest of the 2019-2020 season. But as of right now, the NBA wants to follow their proposal and the schedule that they have put in place, that they want to follow so they can play out the rest of the 2019-2020 season in Orlando. But also, the NBA wants to follow this schedule for the rest of this season, for this off season, and for the beginning of next season. Even though the NBA has a schedule for how they want the next few months to play out, so they can conclude the 2019-2020 season, and so they can move on to the 2020-2021 season. Nothing is a guarantee because of the coronavirus pandemic. And as we've seen with the coronavirus for the last few months, and even going into the next few months, anything can happen with this coronavirus. And really, you're going to have to expect the unexpected. Because even though the NBA has this schedule, it's not a guarantee that these events can happen. And if there's a second wave of the coronavirus pandemic later on this year, it can mess up part of this schedule that the NBA has put in place. So we'll just have to wait and see if the NBA can follow their schedule for the next few months so they can finish off this season and move on to next season. And if the NBA does get to finish off this season, move on to next season, and play the next season, no matter what happens in the next few months, it's just great to see that the NBA has a plan to return and play basketball. And if they get to play basketball, it's just great to see that there will be a league being able to play. And it's going to be great to see that basketball is playing. So I really hope the NBA can return. And if they do, it's going to be great to see that the NBA was able to return. We're just going to have to wait and see what happens going into the next few weeks and into the next few months with this coronavirus pandemic. Moving on now to the show, what to watch for. The return of sports here in the US and around the world. Moving on now, on the next show, I will talk about the coronavirus, NFL football, Major League Baseball, NBA basketball, NHL hockey, college football, and boxing. I hope you all have a great week. Tune in to the next All Sports with Gerardo show next week. I want to say thank you to everybody that listens to All Sports. Subscribe or like my pages on social media at All Sports with Gerardo. Until next time, this is Gerardo.